In FPL Differential XI, I pick a team of 11 lowly owned players who I predict to score the most points for the upcoming game week to assist you in gaining rank over other fantasy managers. There's just 3 rules. The squad must be worth a maximum of 82.5 million. Each player must be selected by less than 10% of managers, and I'm only allowed to pick up to 3 players from a single team. A silhouette of each player I've selected is already on the pitch, so play along by seeing how many of the 11 you can correctly guess. Kicking off the team in goal this week is Donnarumma for his match at home to Everton. From the moment he joined City a month or so ago, Donnarumma slotted straight into the starting lineup, and he's played all 4 games in the Premier League since then, so it seems increasingly unlikely that he'll be a rotation risk. He's kept a couple of clean sheets, and in the game against Brentford, apart from numerous throw-ins delivered into the box, he faced very little in terms of goal-scoring opportunities. And the reason for that was because City largely controlled the match, and I expect a similar outcome to ensue this week, regardless of Everton's impressive start to the season. I don't think Sunderland's 2-0 defeat to United last week is enough to trigger a downward spiral for the Black Cats, and for that reason, we should still consider their defensive assets, especially for this week in particular. Wolves conceded late on against Brighton in Gameweek 7, and with that, they've now picked up a woeful 2 points from a possible 21. Not only that, but they're struggling to score goals, having netted just 5 times across 7 games. Mukiele has now hit the DEFCON threshold in 4 of his 5 Premier League matches since joining the club, and on the week that he failed to do so, it was by a single point. Taking all of that into account, I think he's the standout option to go for from Sunderland's back line. Josko Vardiol rewarded his owners with a double-digit haul last week, having assisted and kept a clean sheet against Brentford. Since returning from injury, Vardiol has now started 4 matches in a row, and there's no doubt that he's City's best option in that left central defensive position, with Nathan Ake being his only real competition. Whilst Vardiol looks pretty nailed to start each week, he still looks to be a much worse FPL option than he was last season, as his general positioning is unlikely to provide him with many opportunities to acquire attacking returns. Despite that, I still fancy his chances of picking up a clean sheet this week at home to Everton. I bought Dan Burn into my own FPL team last week, and I was glad that I did, as he managed to return 11 FPL points. Newcastle have now conceded just 5 goals in 7 matches, which is the joint 2nd lowest in the league below Arsenal. Not only that, but they haven't conceded at all in their 3 away fixtures this season, with 0-0 draws against Bournemouth, Leeds and Villa. Although Brighton will be a tough opponent this week, the Magpies have a very solid defensive line, with the likes of Tonali and Guimaraes sitting just in front, and that makes me feel as though this one will be a close encounter, with a single goal enough to separate the teams. Before revealing the next player, if you fancy winning yourself a channel shoutout and a place on the Differential XI leaderboard, correctly guess the points total of this week's Differential XI team, or guess the player who individually scores the most points in this upcoming game week of FPL. Details of how to submit your predictions will be down below in the pinned comment. Every now and then I like to throw a mega differential into the mix, and this week I've done just that by including Alejandro Garnacho for Chelsea's away trip to Forest. In the match against Liverpool, we saw the Blues employ a game plan that heavily involved supplying their wingers with the ball high up the pitch, and this allowed the likes of Garnacho and Neto to constantly get in and behind the back line. Although he failed to return anything, Garnacho definitely passed the eye test, and I imagine he'll be favoured by Maresca down the left side moving forwards. Forest are in desperate need of a result to get their campaign up and running, and I expect Ange Postecoglou to employ some high-pressing tactics, which consequently will leave space for Chelsea's wingers to exploit. If there's one differential in the game that I highly expect to return something this week, it's Granit Xhaka for Sunderland's home match against Wolves. The reason why I'm including Xhaka here is because there's just so many routes to points, defensive contributions, assists, goal and assist potential from direct free kicks, and of course Sunderland are yet to be awarded a penalty this season, so there's every chance that he could step up and take one of those. At just 5 million, the midfielder offers great value in the game, having averaged approximately 4.5 points per 90 across the campaign so far. It also goes without saying that Wolves at home is an ideal fixture to target. Crystal Palace's 19-game unbeaten run eventually came to an end last weekend, having conceded twice late on against Everton. However, they're still a very strong team, and I don't expect that defeat will faze them too much moving forwards. Sarr is definitely one to watch for our FPL teams, not just for this week, but as a long-term option, as the midfielder has returned in every game bar one that he started this season. Although he is listed as a midfielder, Sarr is often playing up front in a front two alongside Mateta, and he's often finding himself the player who's the furthest up the pitch. This week, Palace face a Bournemouth side who always have goals in them, but defensively, they almost always offer up chances. I'm almost certain that once the Gameweek 8 deadline commences, Bukayo Saka's ownership will be well above 10%, but at the moment, it's currently 9.2%. With that, of course, it's a no-brainer to include the Arsenal midfielder here in the differential 11, as he's looked dangerous since returning from injury. On the other end of the international break, there's not a whole lot not to like about Saka as an FPL option. He's on penalties, takes some corners, Madueke's out injured, and Arteta will look to play his strongest team each week in order to maintain Arsenal's position at the top of the table. After looking defensively solid at the start of the season, Fulham have conceded 6 goals in their last 2 matches, and I personally can't see them keeping a clean sheet against the Gunners. Although West Ham created next to nothing in the match versus Arsenal, I don't think that should steer us away from going for Jarrod Bowen, who's probably one of the standout forward picks to go for in the league this week. The thing I like about Bowen is that he never seems to require many chances in order to return something. We saw that in Gameweek 5 and Gameweek 6, where he returned back-to-back 9-pointers against Palace and Everton. We saw what Nuno was able to achieve with Nottingham Forest last season, so I'm hopeful that he'll be able to improve the Hammers' performances, especially in attack, where Bowen has largely fed off breadcrumbs for as long as I can remember. Nick Voltemade has definitely made his mark upon arriving in the northeast, having scored 3 times in 4 games. The forward took and converted a penalty in Gameweek 7 against Forest, but I suspect he'll remain second in the pecking order below Anthony Gordon, who wasn't on the pitch at the time the spot kick was awarded. Despite that, Voltemade is still a decent pick going forwards, and I suspect he'll get his chances to return something against a Brighton defence that always seems to leak goals. With 7 games played and 0 clean sheets amassed, you'd expect the Seagulls to offer up a fair few chances in this one, and it's a question of whether Newcastle can be clinical in carving out goal-scoring opportunities. Liverpool's expected goals conceded has averaged 1.54 across their last 3 fixtures, and they've definitely shown signs of weakness in the defensive department. Although Man United have had a very disjointed start to the season themselves, they do have a decent amount of creativity in attack, especially with their new signings, and I think that might be enough for them to carve out chances and score a goal or 2 at Anfield. Sesko has started United's last 4 Premier League matches and played the full 90 in their last 2, and on top of that, he scored a goal in both of those games. So with that, I fully anticipate him to lead the line going into this one. Just a quick reminder to let you know that your channel could feature here on the Differential 11 series. The Differential 11 team for Gameweek 7 scored a total of 44 points, with a double up in the Newcastle defence of Pope and Byrne being standout picks. One of you guys was so close to guessing that, with a prediction of 45, but sadly, nobody nobody was spot on. The player of the week was Semenyo from Bournemouth with a monster 18-point haul, and because he's over 10% selected, nobody would have scored points for guessing him. And you know what that means? Unfortunately, the channel leaderboard still remains empty. If you are interested in winning a shout out in next week's video, remember to comment below the number of points that you predict today's differential 11 team to score and the highest scoring player of the game week. And as always, thank you so much for watching and best of luck in hitting those big green arrows.